Hello, my name is Laura Davies and I am Student Recruitment Coordinator here for the Cambridge Foundation Year. In this video, I'm joined by Dr. Alex Price and we are going to talk about the FY SAC in a little bit more detail than we have done in other videos. So in terms of where the FY SAC sits within the application timeline, it's really important for you to be able to see the bigger picture and to understand where it lies within your application process. So we expect you to have maybe chosen your subject, chosen your course, and chosen your universities by now. And this is the point where we'd expect you to check admissions assessments, eligibility, and all other kinds of requirements. After you've submitted your UCAS application, which remember we follow to the January deadline, we will then ask you to complete the FY SAC. This is where it sits in the application process, so this is the point that you'll receive it. After this point, once you've submitted that back to us, you will then receive the admissions assessment and interview if you've been shortlisted for that part of the process. We then expect to get decisions back around April time. So this is generally where we imagine the FY SAC to sit in the application process, and hopefully that helps you in understanding where you are within this timeline yourself as well. So what is the FY SAC in general? So the FY SAC stands for the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is why we often call it the FY SAC or the FY SAQ. There are loads of different ways you might hear us mention it in this video, but basically that is what we're referring to. The FY SAC is essentially just an additional questionnaire that we send out after you've submitted your UCAS application to us. This allows us to gather additional information that you have not provided on your UCAS application. So for example, for the foundation year in particular, this means that we will ask you to submit your eligibility evidence, which I think Alex will talk about later on in the video. It's also a chance for you to talk about why you are interested in the foundation year in particular. If you've watched one of our videos on the personal statement, you'll remember that we don't necessarily expect you to write about the foundation year within your personal statement. And therefore, within the FY SAC, we give you the opportunity to talk about your reasons for wanting to study the foundation year in general. Also, within the FY SAC, we give you an opportunity to express a college of preference, because as you remember, when you are part of the foundation year, you will be part of a college too, which is a real big, important part of university life when it comes to the University of Cambridge. So, where does the FY SAC completely sit? So, we've talked about this where it sits in the application timeline, but you will see on the screen of how it will vaguely work from your end. So once you've submitted your UCAS application to us, we will then send an email to you after this point confirming that we've received your application. After this, we will then email you with the FY SAC, and this is usually within around 48 hours of you submitting your UCAS application. Now, bearing in mind, we'd say 48 hours, but sometimes this can be a little bit more depending on working hours or weekends as well. So please bear that in mind and don't keep us to that 48 hours in particular. You will be emailed this application and it is an online questionnaire that we will ask you to complete. The link is completely unique to you and therefore we really don't recommend sharing this link with anyone else because this link is yours and it is personalized to you. So please do not share that, maybe if your friend is applying to the foundation year as well. Once you have received your FY SAC link, you are then welcome to start filling it out. The FY SAC will save as you go along, so you can come back to little parts of it at a later point if you wish. And this is also where we'll ask you to submit your eligibility evidence. This is really important because you're going to have to submit potentially a few different kinds of evidence for your FY SAC, and therefore this may take a little time to gather. Typically, we give around a 2-week window to send back the FYSAC. Now this changes a little bit when it comes closer to the January deadline, because as we get closer to the January deadline, we have a tighter turnaround on our end, and therefore we need to have your FYSAC completed slightly quicker than that 2-week period. So therefore we suggest gathering your evidence in advance and making sure that you have a complete understanding of what's required from you for the FYSAC before you submit your UCAS application. Once you've submitted the FYSAC back to us, we will then take that into our hands and we will make decisions on the next step in the application process. So what information do you need to provide within the FYSAC? So the FYSAC is technically divided into 7 different sections. So you can see these on the screen right now. These are personal information, education, college preference, eligibility information, extenuating circumstances, and additional questions. And we also have the submit section, which you wouldn't believe, but sometimes people don't necessarily remember to click the submit button, and we don't get your application until you click that submit button. Within this video, we're going to go into a lot of detail about college preference, eligibility information, and additional questions. So just to briefly highlight the other 3 sections, personal information will mean things like your UCAS ID number, just so we can match up your FYSAC with your UCAS application. Education includes things about your educational background. So for example, the topics you're studying within your course or have studied in the past, or maybe your class sizes, just so that we can get an idea, and we can also tailor our interview topics around the kinds of things that maybe you have or maybe you have not studied. Extenuating circumstances is mainly just for us to be aware if you're going to submit an extenuating circumstances form. So that is generally the information that we need to provide. And now I think Alex is going to talk about eligibility information.
Yes, thanks a lot, Laura. So yeah, one of the key purposes of the FYSAC is for us to collect some information about your eligibility. So a reminder again that in order to do the Cambridge Foundation year, you must both meet our academic entry requirements, which is 120 UCAS points, and you also have to meet our specific eligibility criteria, which relate to educational disadvantage. So I'm just going to ask Laura to move on so I can talk a little bit more about this in detail. So you have to meet one criteria in 2 or more categories. You can find out more about all of those on our website, which is on the screen at all times. And the questionnaire is basically collecting some of that information. These are things that UCAS, your UCAS form does not include, and therefore, in order for us to make a decision on your eligibility for the course, you have to provide us with evidence that we can't get from other sources. However, you can read up in advance to find out what we require for the different criteria. So, for example, if you receive free school meals, and that is one of the criteria that you meet, you might ask your school to provide a letter that confirms that you receive free school meals. Or if you're applying on the basis of coming from a low-income household, you might need to provide evidence of your family's income. So for example, a parent P60 or evidence of certain benefits. And there's a whole range of different types of evidence that we need for different types of criteria. It might be a letter from social services or your local authority if you're in care. It could be a letter from a doctor or a medical professional if it's one of the medical areas that you're looking at. And in many cases, it could be a letter from your school as well. So you can review and see exactly what is needed in the document that's on the screen now. It's called Guide to Completing the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire. And that'll give you a rundown of all the questions in the FYSAC, but in particular, what eligibility criteria requires evidence and what that evidence might consist of. We do recommend that you review this in advance and that you set about gathering that evidence as early as you can, especially if you're going to be relying on other people. We have heard of people already who, for example, have asked their GP for a letter, but they can't get that in time for the form to be submitted. So obviously, if you can get that organised in advance, then you will be able to submit much more quickly and meet your deadlines. I will say, if you can't get the evidence and it's outside of your control, for example, you have asked for something and maybe the Home Office or your GP can't provide it in time, if you let us know, we can do it on a sort of case-by-case basis and review it, but we do recommend that you do this as far in advance as you can. And then the other thing to say on this is we recommend that you provide details for everything that you think you need. Obviously, don't just check the boxes if you know that you won't meet it, but if there are more than one thing that you meet, if you provide us with that evidence, we have found that sometimes when we're reviewing these applications, we find that people think that they're eligible, but actually when we look, we find that they're not. So the more that you provide, the better chance we have of making sure that you know, we get you through this particular stage of the process. Next slide, please. So you have to submit the evidence. It comes up in the form, and what basically happens is you see a list of all of the criteria in each of the categories, and you check the boxes for which ones that you meet. That means that the follow-up questions you see are based on what you've checked. So that means that you're only seeing information that is particularly relevant to you, and you don't see a load of questions that don't apply to you. So in most cases, you will have to give us a short description about, you know, the circumstances, and in many of the cases, you also have to upload evidence. So that's the documents that I talked about before. You can submit it in a range of different ways. It could be an image, perhaps you could take a photograph of an original document on your phone, or it could be a PDF document. Those would be our kind of ideal formats. If you have an unusual file type, if your phone takes images and you know that it takes them in a file type that isn't common, or if you have a document in, you know, maybe a Mac version of Pages or something instead of Word, we may not be able to open that. So we'd recommend that you put it in a common file format like PDF, or you know, an image is a JPEG, just to make sure that we can open it at the other end, because if we can't open it, we're going to have to get in touch with you and ask you to provide it again. For some of these, you may also have multiple sources of evidence. So, for example, if it's a household income measure, you might need to include income evidence from both your parents in the one upload slot. So what you can do is you can combine them into one document. There are a range of different tools. If you have software like Adobe Acrobat, you could use that. Or you can use free online tools like one that we recommend is combinepdf.com, which just sticks them all in one file for you and makes it as easy as possible to do that. Also, I will say we've had some people that have been reviewing the form and kind of skipping forward to get to the later sections, and they can't do that until they've uploaded something. So they upload like a placeholder document or something, and then they panic because they can't figure out how to replace that. It's really easy to do. Just whatever the final version is, you just drag it over the existing document where it's uploaded, and it will replace that file. So don't worry too much about that if you have done that as you go through. If you have any issues with getting evidence, or if you don't understand exactly what is required, please do get in touch with us. Our email address is readily available, and we're only too happy to help. But obviously, tell us as much as you can, and perhaps give us your UCAS ID or your full name, so that we can make sure that we can find your record and get you a resolution as quickly as we can. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about college preference. Now, college preference is something that we have talked about already before on this channel and in our various webinars. It's something that you don't have to do. If you don't have a college preference, don't worry too much. You don't have to express it. But if you do want to, express a preference for a certain college at Cambridge, you are very welcome to do that. And the FI-SAC is the place to do it. This is a bit of a difference between the foundation year and applying for a degree programme at Cambridge. Usually, when you apply through UCAS, you select a college then. You will have noticed, if you're watching this video and you've already applied through UCAS, that when you applied through UCAS with open application. And that just means that we're collecting your college preference at this slightly later stage. Next slide, please. So how do you choose a college? This is something that, again, we've talked about already on this channel. Your college is your home at Cambridge, and there's no right or wrong way to go about making a selection of a college. And as I said before, you can choose one if you want to, if there's something in particular that feels important to you that you'd like us to know. Or you can make an open application. There is no advantage or disadvantage to any approach. There is no way of gaming the system to be more likely to get an offer because you've chosen a certain college. And that's especially the case with the foundation year, because actually we don't look at your college preference until right at the very end of the process, when we've already decided that we're going to make you an offer. So please don't kind of worry yourself about trying to give yourself the best chance of getting in by choosing a certain college, because it simply doesn't work that way, especially with this programme, but actually more generally as well. When you are choosing a college, you can reflect on what's important to you. I will say, if you're an older applicant, 21 or over, you might consider our mature student colleges. And also, if you are female, we do have some female-only colleges if you would prefer that kind of environment. But there's a whole range of other factors that you might consider, whether it's kind of the location, the building, the types of bedrooms available, the size of the community. So there's lots of things to consider. And I'd really recommend that you check out the websites of the colleges. And if you don't know how exactly to get to them, and you can't remember which colleges are involved in the foundation year, we actually have a colleges page on our website as well. The link's on the slide there, that you can go, and that'll kind of provide you as a starting point for jumping into the colleges that you might choose.
So then we move on to the additional questions section of the FYSAC, and this is where we give you the opportunity to answer some different questions that we have posed to you, and we also give you the word limit, a rough word limit that we expect as well. So we want you to present these answers as if you were writing them part of an essay. So this means no bullet points or abbreviations, and do not exceed the word limit that we give you. Essentially, you can kind of see these as almost an extension of your personal statement, but just directly relating to your foundation year interests.
So yes, this is the first question that you'll see in that section of the form. And as Laura mentioned, it is kind of like a mini personal statement. It's a chance for you to tell us the same kinds of things that are specific to the foundation year. So particularly if you've written about a certain subject in your personal statement, this is a real opportunity to tell us more about what in particular about the foundation year interests you. We're obviously interested to hear about your subject interest in the foundation year, and this, it's not a problem for us to know that you're interested in a particular subject. That's great, but we do want to know why you're particularly interested in the foundation year as a route to that study. So in this question, you have only 300 words, but here you could comment on perhaps why you decided to apply, what aspects of the course, as detailed on our website, particularly interest you, or indeed what subjects or a combination of subjects in the future might interest you too. We're very much here seeking to understand your motivations. So you should really try and reflect on them and not just repeat information about the course itself. So just copy and paste from our website. We already know that. We want to find out about you. We have already got your UCAS personal statement, so this is really the opportunity to add extra content or context specific to you for the foundation year programme.
For this next question, what do you hope to achieve by participating in the foundation year, is a little bit similar to the question that Alex just talked through. I would suggest at this point, this is where I like to suggest making a mind map of how you would separate these two different questions, because there are ways that they could easily become confused, or maybe you would end up repeating yourself. But by making it clear when writing down and planning your answers, which you have the opportunity to do because you've seen these questions before they're posed to you, it means that you'll be able to write clear and concise answers. Similar to what Alex said, we're finding out about what you personally want to achieve by participating in the foundation year. Remember that we're using this as an opportunity to find out lots more information about you, and therefore we really want it to be as personal as possible to yourself.
And then this question is a little bit different again. So this is about the impact of the circumstances you've faced so far. And in this, we're particularly interested in the things that have made you eligible for the foundation year. So the things that you've checked the box to say that you meet in our eligibility criteria, how do you think that they have impacted on your education? We're looking for you to be reflective again, and again, we're looking for you to be personal to yourself. We're looking for you to be honest about that, about your experiences. I will say, we've had a couple of questions in the past about whether this is a good place to talk about the impact of COVID on your education. You can mention it if you think it's particularly pertinent, but I will say that, of course, we're aware that everyone has had a difficult time in the past few years with online schooling, disrupted education, self-isolating at home, changes of teachers. We're aware that nearly everyone has experienced that to some degree. So it's probably not a good use of the 100 words that you have here because you don't have a lot of space. So really think about the things that make you eligible and how that has impacted on your education. It could also be your schooling itself, and perhaps you missed time at school. It could be your home study environment, or if it's made that difficult, and also your eventual examination results as well, if it's had a sort of an impact on that. You could comment here on things that you've done to try and overcome the challenges. You could also talk a little bit briefly about how it makes you feel about study or about your plans for the future. And you may even talk about what you might have done differently if you'd had the chance. Those would all be good reflective ways of tackling this question. Because again, here we're seeking to understand your motivation, but also your approach to learning and study.
So this next question, can you describe any additional responsibilities you have, is a similar length to the question that Alex has just talked through, so 100 words. And this is the kind of question where we expect some candidates may have more stuff to write than others, and it is also completely okay that if you have no additional responsibilities. By additional responsibilities, we mean things like maybe you care for your siblings after school, maybe you are a young carer in some form, maybe you have part-time work or part-time responsibilities outside of your educational studies. There are lots of things that class as additional responsibilities. We're using this question to understand a little bit more about your life and your background and the other things that you have going on outside of your educational studies.
And finally, the last question on the form. It has been quite a long form, for which we apologise, but everything we've asked has been totally necessary. And finally, we ask, is there anything else that you'd like us to know? We've given you 600 words here just so you can write as much or as little as you want. And it's basically just your chance to tell us anything that you think that we should know that hasn't been covered elsewhere on the form. You can use this in a range of different ways if there's maybe a section that you wanted to expand on, or if there's something completely unrelated that you want to tell us. But also just to add that this doesn't disadvantage you at all if you don't have anything else to say, because we appreciate that you've given us lots of information by this stage of the form. But this really is just in case there's something else that you want to tell us.
So we have some top tips for you when completing the FYSAC. So the first and the biggest one is to make use of all the guidance that we have online. So you saw on one of the slides that Alex showed earlier about the forms that we have that talk through each of the application stages. Also on our YouTube channel, we have a video of Alex walking through the FYSAC and going through every single section of the FYSAC, which is a very useful video to watch. Another thing that we would really suggest is making sure that you gather your evidence in advance. Sometimes this can be tricky to gather evidence from different sources, and therefore getting it done as in advance as possible is a really good move to make. Make sure that if you do not receive your FYSAC email, then you let us know and keep in contact. We can only help you if we know that you're having troubles in any way. So please do make sure that you keep in touch if you haven't received that within roughly around 48 hours of submitting your UCAS application. Make sure that you're adding the correct evidence and make sure you're not adding different documents by accident. As Alex mentioned earlier, putting a placeholder document so you can move on further in the application and then forgetting that it was there or something like that. Just making sure that you've had the correct thing. So making sure you check over your application again and again, just to make sure that everything is in the right place. A final tip, and a really big important one, is that we recommend that you add these emails to your safe sender list, or at least making sure that they're not on your blocked list in any way. So you can see all 5 of them on the screen. This is really important because we may contact you on any one of these. So yeah, please make sure that you do make sure these are emails that we can get through to you on your email address. Otherwise, you may be missing out on vital information in regards to the FYSAC.
So something to say on the emails is actually when you submit your UCAS application, within that kind of 48 hours or 3 days window that we get in contact with you after that, you'll actually get 2 emails. So you'll get what we call the welcome email, which is basically an email saying, thank you for your application, we've got your UCAS form, and then it runs through some of the next steps. That's also the opportunity for you to submit a disability form if you have any special educational needs, or if there's anything that you'd particularly like us to know so that we can adjust the admissions assessment or interview process. So that's the first email that you'll get. And then the FY-SAC link will come by a separate email quite soon after. And the person who sends both emails usually works through one and then the other. So you'll get the FY-SAC usually within an hour or two afterwards, if not perhaps the next morning, if you get your welcome email in the afternoon. So if you haven't got either of those emails within 5-6 days of submitting your UCAS application, there is a problem. Go and check your junk folder in case they've both been routed there. Or if you haven't received them at all, please get in touch with us on that first email address that's on the screen there, foundation.year@admin.cam.ac.uk, and say, I applied and I haven't received anything, so that we can make sure that we get it to you as soon as possible.
We have some frequently asked questions, which Alex has just answered the first one for you, which is, I've submitted my application via UCAS, but I haven't received an email. What should I do? As Alex has just mentioned, you can get in contact with us on our email address, foundation.year@admin.cam.ac.uk, just to make sure that we know that you're on the list and it hasn't been an error on our part, and also make sure that you check your junk folders too, just in case. The next question we have is, what is the deadline for the FY-SAC? And this is usually 2 weeks, as we mentioned earlier, but as we get closer to January, the deadline gets a little bit shorter. Alex, do you remember the date? Sorry, I ask you this all the time.
Yes, so the deadline for the FY-SAC for most people is a personalised deadline, which is the 2 weeks. But if you are submitting very, very close to the 26th of January, we need to have all of the FY-SACs back to us by the 2nd of February. So that means obviously that's not a full 2 weeks if you're applying on the 25th or the 26th of January. So in some ways, the earlier you can get your UCAS application in, the better.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question on our frequently asked questions list is, I don't know which college to choose on my application, help. Alex's advice earlier was really useful, but we also have lots of information on our website around the colleges that are taking foundation year students. I would highly recommend having a look on all of the different websites just to see whether you have a preference of college. But it's also really important to note that no matter which college students end up at, they usually fall in love with the college and they fit in really well, and it will be your home away from home. So please do not worry if you can't make a decision and can't find the perfect college for you. I can guarantee that you will feel at home there. The next question on our frequently asked questions list is, I've submitted my FY-SAC, but I want to change my college choice. Can I do this? Can they do this, Alex?
You can do this. I will say that probably we would want there to be a fairly good reason that you'd want to do it, rather than just you like the windows more on another one or something. But if you particularly strongly want to change your college preference, you can email us and tell us, and we will update your record. Obviously, that is up until the point really where we decide on making offers, because at that stage your offer would be from a certain college, and at that stage it is not possible to change your college preference.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have a couple of further reading resources that we would recommend. The first of which is our YouTube channel, which you are already watching this video on potentially, and therefore you will have access to a whole load of other videos and resources. The next is visiting our website, which again is on the bottom of every single slide, and I'll also put it in the description below so that you can access it really easily. We have so much information and a couple of supporting documents on the foundation year supplementary application questionnaire, so they will talk you through every step there. And the final one is that you may want to sign up to our newsletter, which you can scan the QR code on the screen and select foundation year as your first subject of interest, and then we'll send you additional resources and guidance within that newsletter. As always, if you have any questions or need any further information after this, please do feel free to get in touch. We are always happy to help.